Hello and welcome to the Sandro Forte podcast. Over the many years I've been running a business, I've met many successful people, entrepreneurs, sports stars, celebrities, and dare I say, even royalty. So what makes a person successful? Do we know what success is? And the all-important question, can we create success for ourselves? This podcast series invites a diverse group of people to share their insights, their wisdom, and the things they've learned along the way. In 2009, Laurence Kemball-Cook set up his company PaveGen from a bedsit in Brixton. 10 years later, it's one of the fastest growing clean tech firms that reaches across the globe and is valued at over £20 million. The innovative company finds ways of creating off-grid energy from anything that moves, like our feet or cars. The initial technology that was designed were floor tiles that were installed in buildings and even under football pitches to generate power from the movement of the feet passing over it. Laurence's work has seen him brushing shoulders with the likes of Barack Obama, will.i.am, and the singer Akon. He compares his company to being similar to that of Apple, with the aim of making his technology a key component in the smart cities of the future. So I'd like to welcome our very special guest today, Laurence Kemball-Cook. Laurence, welcome.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks so much.
Pleasure's ours. It's been great to have you on the show, and something we've been trying to organise for quite some time because you are a busy man. So I have to start with the obvious question. Where on earth do you get such a clever idea from?
Well, I guess the idea is a floor that generates energy from footsteps. And I guess I was really lucky in that I was in 2008. I was at Loughborough University studying industrial design and technology. And when I was there, I was thinking about sustainability. I think I was the generation that was, we grew up with global warming and banging the drum about sea level rising. And I was really passionate around sustainability. During my degree at Loughborough, I got a chance to do some work at E.ON. So E.ON used to be PowerGen. At the time was one of the biggest energy companies in Europe. And they said to me, Laurence, hey, look, we think you're doing some really interesting work at Loughborough. Can you come and join our team? And we want you to be part of this kind of like ninja group building streetlights that are powered by solar energy and powered by wind. So I walk into this huge power station, huge engineering team, and we start looking at this problem. And so I start speaking to an LED company. They invest £500,000 in this LED company. So they really wanted to speak to me. I didn't even know what corporate investing meant. I then started working with a solar research institute at Loughborough. E.ON invested in them as well. So suddenly we had all these people helping us. And I spent a year there trying to build these solar streetlights. Now, the challenge is with using solar in cities is that you don't get very good sunlight. So today we're in Soho, there's high buildings around us. There's not very good sunlight on the street. And if you want wind, you've got to go out at sea or really high up. So I actually realized after a year that it kind of didn't work. So I almost had failed because it just wasn't tangible or commercial to use the energy of the sun, of the wind. And not to mention, when there's no sun, there's no power, right? So what do you do at nighttime? So I left E.ON. In my mind, I'd failed, but I was hanging my head in shame, and I returned for my final year at Loughborough University. So I'm in this amazing department that had the biggest rapid prototyping laboratory in Europe at the time. I had a machine shop as big as, I guess, any house that I could ever have lived in, plastic prototyping lab, and I really had these amazing facilities. And I kept thinking about this problem of energy in cities, and I thought, hold on, look, what if we could create energy from people? And I seeded the idea in my mind, and then I guess I evolved the story throughout my time at university. I'd have many sleepless nights. My desk in my bedroom at uni, or my bedroom at university, had 6 desks in it. So I had one for mechanical building, I had one for engineering drawing, I had one for electronics, one for electronic rigs that would be simulating the power of a footstep. So sadly, the only banging in my bedroom at university was coming from the machines that I was building. So I got deeply really into it at university. And essentially, I came out of university and I had a wooden prototype that showed you could generate energy from a single footstep. And I wasn't planning to build a company. I really, really believed in it. I mean, so in my mind, it was something that I had to succeed in. And I'd won £5,000 from the Royal Society of Arts. So I entered a competition for something separate around redesigning rural postal services. But that 5K was as much as 500K is today. So what I achieved with that £5,000, like I as a student, like my student loan was probably £1,000. So like that amount of money was astronomical to me at the time. So I started going to factories, getting to build me stuff, working with consultants who were like amazing. And suddenly just after uni, I had a position where I kind of had a pretty cool prototype that would probably cost me £500,000 today, but I managed to do it, really, really cheaply. So I guess that was at the start. And I guess that's when things started to get interesting.
So let's fast forward a moment and then we'll fill in the bit in the middle. So just to put this into perspective, tell us about some of the awards and recognition that you've achieved in those, 10 years since the bedsit days?
Yeah, so I think we've been really lucky to win a bunch of awards around the world, from the World Technology Awards in America we won the Climate Week Awards for our work and towards energy. I was a finalist at Shell Livewire for Shell Entrepreneur of the Year, and that started a whole scope of work with Shell directly. And then, for me, I guess it's not an award, but people may be familiar with TED Talks, and I'd never heard of TED before, and this is 2010, 2011. So really early days. And I got invited to California to do a TED Talk. And I guess that changed my life because the kind of people I met there and the attitude to innovation was very different. So, today I've done 5 TED Talks, and to me, that's some of my proudest moments of really being allowed to take the stage with such amazing people and tell the story. So I guess, look, we've won some really exciting awards in our journey, and they continue. But I guess I try to really focus on the results as opposed to the awards that come with the good results that you can get.
So you started, Laurence, in a bedsit with this embryonic business and idea that you've obviously nurtured over time with amazing results. But obviously there's a lot of people out there that, have a big idea but don't really know how to get it off the ground. Is there a process that you went through? How did you turn that pipe dream? How did you turn that great idea into reality, apart from the fact you got £5,000?
Yeah, so I think the thing maybe to start with of like what I think you need before you go with an idea is you need to really believe in your idea, and you've got to be ultimately so committed to that. So I think true belief, to sacrifice everything to make that idea come true, is the first thing. So I wouldn't do an idea half-hearted until I really believed in it. I think that you've got to be bold, so you've got to really believe in it in terms of actually, you've got to find your own luck. You don't make an idea and someone gives you £1 million. You have an idea and you knock on every single person's door. You send letters to their office. You do whatever it takes to get those people to recognize it. So I think creating your own luck, and I think that it's not a linear process. So I think I was lucky in that my background as a designer. I'm not an investment banker. I'm a designer, and the design process is that you're taking so many different feeds in from everywhere: human, physical, digital, mechanical, and you've got to evolve that process in the only way you see fit, which can be very organic, but it's definitely not linear. So I think they're the kind of things I look for if I'm thinking about an idea or supporting or investing in an entrepreneur. And then it goes back to my journey. I said before, I won the prize money, left uni, and I was like, oh, what should I do now? And I sat in a flat in Brixton. I was there in my bedroom. It was basically a bed sit. I spent 5 years in Brixton, and I think the interesting thing in this flat is that I was refining the prototypes. So I was swapping the bits of wood that were duct taped together with pieces of metal, and then I was making the metal more efficient by putting bearings in it and really changing the mechanical design. I was promoting the brand. I was dragging this prototype that probably weighed at the time about 50 kilos. I was dragging it all around London. So I had a granny trolley, and basically I'm dragging it on the tube, and this is before Google Maps. So I had like pieces of paper with all the maps on. So usually it was raining, the map had disintegrated, I'm lugging this huge piece of metal. I went to probably around 200 VCs. I went to pitch them to invest, and it was in a credit crunch. We're talking 2009, 2010. And if you were a VC in a credit crunch, you'd remember that there was no funding for pre-revenue companies. That died. So I went to, several hundred. They all said no. I went to my university. They said, we'll help you, but give us 51% of the company. I said, no, thank you. And then I went to the government, and the government had a high technology development group that would help new ideas. And they said an expert would phone me. So I'm waiting in this bed sit for my phone to ring. My phone rang, and it was the government expert. And he goes, Laurence, forget it will never work. So I had the VC saying, forget it will never work. The university trying to steal the idea off me. And then the government, like saviors who were meant to help me, saying it will never work. So I guess, I was up against it because no one would buy the product without investment and no one would invest without revenue. So it was a catch-22. And this is a really common thing I see with entrepreneurs is you just get stuck, between both options of how to grow. So I guess what I did from that point is, I started promoting the brand as heavily as I could, getting everywhere, working with government. I joined David Cameron on his trade mission to China, and I was on a private 747 with him and some other CEOs. And the interesting thing, I was a CEO of a two-man company, and I'm there with a CEO of Standard Chartered, of McLaren, of JCB, of the Premier League, and these were incredibly. And I think the CEO of the London Stock Exchange. So I was with some incredibly influential individuals, and I guess they kind of helped me on that journey to move forward. And what I did, I guess, between the promotion and growing the brand was engineer the product, make it more robust. So build many, many more prototypes. But what I realized is I needed to prove it worked. So what I did is I persuaded a friend of mine. I may have paid him in beer. I'm not going to guarantee that, but I may have paid him in beer. And at 2 a.m, we broke into a building site at the South Bank. So it's me, my kind of wooden/metal prototype that showed you could generate energy from a footstep. It's him with a bag of cement, a bucket, and equipment to mix the cement. And then we had a spade. So we go in, we dig this hole in the South Bank, we put my prototype in the ground, we slot it in the hole, we mix the cement and we cement it into place, and then we connect it up to lighting. So we wanted to show that when you walk, you can generate energy. So we plugged in around 10 lights around it, and when you stood on it, it would light up lighting in this public area. So we took some pictures, we put it on the website, and the title on the website is "The Future of Energy is Here." So it was quite a bold claim. And the next day, I got a phone call from Westfield, and they said, look, we're building Stratford City on the Olympic site. We just want to check, have you done an installation? I was like, yes. They were like, does it work? I was like, yes. They didn't ask me, was it illegal or not? So I wasn't lying. And, I closed a 200K deal with Westfield off the back of that. And so suddenly we went from, I guess, a slightly crazy, weird bloke in a bedsit trying to play with this floor that would generate energy to I got an office. I started building a team of mainly electrical and design engineers to help me build the vision, and when we started building the product from there. And I think what was really interesting is, we got to revenue, so people wanted to speak to us. We closed a couple of 100K deal with Diageo just afterwards that saw our product go around Europe. But then I started raising money, so I didn't really know what investment was. But I realized I needed a lot of money to build the prototypes, the tooling, the manufacturing. So we raised around 150K from friends and family. So I basically had a rig in a garage at this point that was simulating 1 million footsteps. People saw it, believed in it, and I got around 5K from various people, from old grannies to old friends to anyone I could find, really. And then we went ahead and raised 350K through London Business Angels, then 500K through the Harvard Business Angels. And it went on, and we raised some more along the way. And essentially, I raised money at every different stage at every valuation to ensure that we kept control of the company. I think now there's a lot of entrepreneurs who get really, really excited about their first VC raise and give away 30% of the company on the get-go. But I guess we did it in stages. So I went from 1 million valuation to 2 to 5 to 6 to 9 to 12. And that was on milestones that I'd achieved, that I told everyone I'd achieve. And then, we went from there into batch production and then started working around the world. And I think, today we've got to a point where we're in over 32 countries. We're working in Kazakhstan to Nigeria to Korea. We've just done our first $1 million contract in California with a bank that in the market, and really getting into every single corner of the world. And we work with government to private organizations, brands, and all these different areas we're getting into. So I think we've gone through this amazing, I guess, kind of period of growth from a guy in a bedroom till actually now we're selling like big enterprise level solutions to big corporates, and that's kind of where it's taken me along that way.
Wow, that is quite some story. So there's a lot of people listening that, and I want to be clear about this. I don't want people to feel disconnected from somebody as successful as you. So to put this into perspective, and you've already touched on this, there seem to be many challenges along the way. I love the fact that you knocked on all those doors and you made all those phone calls and you send all those letters. That's a prerequisite for success in many ways, isn't it? You can't. It just doesn't happen. You have to put in the hard yards, and that's clearly what you did at the beginning.
I mean, I think that it was really hard at the beginning, and I've got some stories around difficulties, but hey, it's still hard now. Like the complexity and the challenges get greater and greater. So like every day, I feel like being an entrepreneur, especially in hardware, and I think when you build something physical, you got to get corporate very quickly, because if you've got 3,000 components sourced from all around the world and one of them goes wrong, it's game over. I think if you're developing a digital platform, you can afford to be slightly more playful in your journey, because it's in one place and there's kind of one button to play with it, and you can protect that from being from damaging it. Whereas we've had to get very, very serious early on. And I think, for everything from my first major installation, we had a truck, and it was a 200k deal to cover the Champs-Elysees in Paris for Schneider Electric, and they had a marathon running there. And this was our first big deal. They said to me, Laurence, we want you to cover the Champs-Elysees. How long will it take you? And I'm like, well, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I've never done this before, more than 10 tiles. I have no idea. And they said, Laurence, can you do it in 6 hours? And so I go away and I said, yes. And then I freak out, right? I'm going, how the hell am I going to install all these pave gens on a massive area in a foreign country? I've never done it before. So I brought in the Gurkhas, so a group from the British Army, and we actually installed it in 55 minutes. And I was so confident after all this planning. I was there with a client with a stopwatch, and we did it in 55 minutes. But there was, on the way, the truck got impounded because the driver, who was not employed by us but through the factory, he drove for too long over his tachometer, I think. So he was allowed to drive for maybe 11 hours, and he drove for 12. It got impounded, and then they found out the truck was too heavy. So I had to negotiate getting to Dover with a 12-ton pickup to go and release the goods from the back of his truck to then get them to the site. And it was just the biggest problem you could imagine. And I think everything we do has challenges, from dealing with ships that aren't allowed to port because of weather to products not working and vandalism. And I think that journey it's all about problem solving. And I think as an engineer, all I'm on this planet to do is solve problems. So certainly, yeah, it's full of pain and suffering, but I think you might have a bad day for 6 days in a row or 10 days in a row. But when you have a good day, then it's all worth it, because suddenly it's come together and they paid you and the client's happy and you've had 1 million people walk on your product. So I definitely think that the highs outweigh the lows, but there's a hell of a lot of lows in this journey, as you're scaling. We've
known each other for quite some time now, and I have to say, and it never ceases to amaze me how passionate you are. And it's one of the first things you said today, is that belief and passion is kind of component part number one, the first step on that journey. And then I heard you say, well, I'll use the word hard work, the hard yards, the knocking on the doors and so on. What are the other steps that you've had to take on that really amazing journey? In terms of what advice would you give to somebody looking to do something similar to you, start their own business, got a great idea. So, okay, I believe in it. I'm prepared to work hard. But are there other things that you've had to consider along the way that have helped you get to where you've got to?
Yeah, so I think it's an incredible challenge to be able to be someone who can take an idea and take it into a company. And I mean, as I said, large company, we're still a small organization, but I think that a lot of it comes down to you as an individual. So I think, I was a designer sketching on a piece of paper, sitting in a lab, and I had to turn into a CEO. And I think I had to almost change who I was every 6 months based on where the company was. And you say, look, why am I here? I'm here ultimately to make my shareholders a return on their investment. So there's a responsibility as being a chief executive officer, and really understanding that responsibility and the governance and respect and dealing with things. I'm not in a lab anymore. I'm not building things with a hammer and a drill like I used to. And I think that journey has been really interesting for me to learn the power of what it means to be a chief executive officer. You know, I'm an officer of my team and of my shareholders. So I think that's been a really interesting journey of understanding that and what that means. I've got a great board of directors, you know, so I've got a guy called, gentleman, sorry, I say guy, I've come from Silicon Valley, so I'm dropping guy. But so, you know, I've got a gentleman called Jeff Martin, who is head of multimedia and entertainment at Apple. You know, he spent 15 years working next door to Steve Jobs and was responsible for platforms like iTunes and iOS being released. So, you know, I've got someone like Jeff on my board who brings, you know, he's been around for a lot longer than I have. He's seen lots of digital change, and there's it's getting to work with those great individuals who support my vision. And I've got to learn to take advice from those people. And I think, look, I'm headstrong. Everyone can have an ego. Everyone can be arrogant. And I think it's recognizing those weaknesses in an individual. And I think the second thing is you got to learn to like switch off in certain ways, because no matter what you say, no one can do 16 hours every day for 5 years. It's just, I don't believe it's possible. And I guess I've tried that, and I've kind of done it. And maybe I did 4 years and then realized it was too much. I think it's learning how to switch off and find things that can make you a better person. So I guess I started racing Ironman competitions. You know, I ran two marathons last year in 2 weeks. I like taking on big challenges, and I feel that makes me a better person. I think really understanding that sitting in an office every single minute of every day doesn't necessarily make you a better leader of a company. So I feel like I've evolved my thoughts on things like that, because I used to spend weeks on end on the same desks working on the same problem, and now is about balancing things out. So there's a kind of one of, you know, personal response to your question.
Laurence, I have to ask you, I know because the business is growing so exponentially and there's so many people getting behind it, one of the things that I know you're looking to do is to raise some money. And whilst this isn't a commercial plug, I'm really fascinated to know how you're going about that, because that's an important part of any business in terms of its development.
Sure, yeah. So capitalization is key, especially when you're making stuff. And, you know, we've got to spend £1 million on industrial tooling to bring the price down of the technology. But recently we've just brought on board new investors called the Hedunja Group. And the Hedunja Group are really exciting because they're a 50 billion revenue Indian company focused on infrastructure. And they bought British Leyland and turned it into the biggest truck company in India. And the gentlemen who are currently running it were the two richest men in the UK in 2016. So we brought them in as investors. But what we're actually doing is we're launching a crowdfund. It's going to be going live on Crowdcube. It should be on now, where people can invest from as little as £10 in the company and join us on the journey as we scale up. And with the aim of, you know, we aim to do a trade sale or IPO within the next kind of 2 to 4 years. And then investors would see a return. Obviously, this isn't a formal investment plug, but it's just an idea of like how to scale it. And I think equity crowdfunding has been the most transformative aspect for new businesses in the past decade in the UK.
I mean, it strikes me, it's obvious that you're somebody that has in their DNA a desire to stretch themselves, overcome challenges and obstacles and push yourself. And that's, you know, an inherent trait of successful people, entrepreneurs. But, you know, there are obviously some people out there that are not born like that, but they've still got a great idea. And you've shared some of the steps along the way. What's the one bit of advice that you've picked up on this incredible journey that you weren't born with? Because there's a lot of traits that you have that clearly are part of who you are. But is there anything you've learned along the way apart from readjusting the sails? Because clearly things change on a constant basis. And I love the fact, by the way, just while you're thinking about the answer, I love the fact that you broke into a building yard and start digging holes and filling them with concrete, which I think in the modern world, a lot of people think that surely that doesn't happen anymore, but it really does.
Well, yeah. Hey, on day one, you've got to do whatever it takes. If you're in a village in Scotland and you've got the next idea for Facebook, like there's no one in that village, I imagine, who's going to help you. You know, you need to go and bang down doors, find the people that will help you, go to Silicon Valley, hang out in every restaurant or bar the VCs are in, do whatever it takes. It's definitely a trait. So your question
about just, have you picked up anything along the way that you perhaps that wasn't part of you? Any advice that somebody's given you along the way? For example, you know, a skill set, a thought process, ways to overcome a particular challenge.
Yeah, so I think the things I picked up on the way that I guess I'm learning more and more about now is it's the power of the tribe. And so what I mean by that is the power of a network. So I think what I've done is, I've been part of the entrepreneurship community in London since 2009. There wasn't really one in 2009 in the same way. WeWork didn't exist then, and all that good stuff. And so I think I've got a really close-knit community of other entrepreneurs. Some have created billion-dollar companies. Some are, getting to their first 100K investment, and some are starting out. But I think what we all have in common is that everyone wants to help each other. And so if you're looking at, we'll do stuff like we want to increase our sales on the B2B SaaS level in America. So I'll sit down with 5 of my entrepreneur friends who've got, say, 5 million revenue, and we'll sit and we'll exchange our contacts and our sales leads so we can accelerate each other's growth. And I think the really interesting thing is if you're looking at investors, for example, and my lawyer introduces me to an investor, like that investor doesn't really care what the lawyer thinks. No disrespect to my lawyer, who's amazing. But when an entrepreneur who's raised money from that investor says, hey, Laurence is really cool, doing some really exciting stuff, really driven, you should look at him, I have a really serious conversation with that investor. So I think working with a tribe, and I'll spend 10% of my time helping the community because you get so much back from it. And I think, I'm still learning to build my network now. I hear you can sign contracts at a karaoke bar in Hong Kong, right? So you never know where your network will take you, and the kind of the people you learn to do business with, but also become friends. So I think the power of a network is something that is so important to get right, because if you know someone for a long time, it's often if you ask them for help, they will help you a lot more than knocking on someone's door on day one asking for help. So I really believe in that, the power of the tribe.
The big question that I don't think anyone's ever really found the answer to, but I'd like to ask you because I want to understand how you see it as an individual, and you're certainly well qualified to answer the question. What does success look or feel like to Laurence Kemball-Cook?
So I think the idea of success, the common misconception is the idea of like having an island, right? And everyone went, hey, I was successful, I got an island. But I think like it's about creating impact, because when you create impact and like positive impact, good things follow. So some people may say it's about wealth, or I'd say, well, it's about, we want to be able to affect every single person living in every developed city on day one. And as soon as I get that reach, then I feel like I'm having impact. So on that journey, I think we're probably 2% of the way there, but it is great to get the recognition in new markets, and people have heard of us, and when people are building a city they come to us, and I think that when we start to create that momentum, that's when good stuff happens, and it all trickles down from there, because then I can have a bigger team, and then hey, one day we'll sell for $1 billion, and that's a great thing to happen. But it's not necessarily, that's not the prize. The prize is creating impact along the way and becoming an energy solution for urban cities, and also moving to things like data and getting, I guess, also like higher up in the food chain in the tech world, because I think the more we learn, the more powerful we get, and the more people that can help us, and the bigger the network, and the more other people you can help, and you kind of get to that critical mass. So I think it's about, overall, impact in terms of getting product market fit and community as a whole being behind what you're doing.
That's a lofty ambition, $1 billion company, but I certainly wish you great success on that journey yet to come. In terms of the future, apart from growing the business, what else do you aspire to do? What drives you? I mean, Ironmans, marathons, and all those crazy things that most people think, yeah, one day I'll get round to it, but never quite do it. What else drives you? What else is yet to come?
Well, it's a great question. I think, for me, I like challenging myself. I think that pushing the body to a limit is a very similar mental task to pushing your mind to the limit during a phase of work for a company. So I definitely don't want to stop doing those things. I need to have slightly more time, but I'm not running a business to do that. But I think, ultimately, I've never had a job, right? I've just built a company. So if you look at the word entrepreneurship, that kind of summarizes like my life, and maybe I'm too much of an entrepreneur, and I do that across other parts of my life. But I think I enjoy starting companies. I enjoy investing in companies and supporting a management team that I really believe in. And so I think it's really like supporting the development ecosystem. But who knows? Maybe politics, maybe write a book, maybe climb some mountain that no one's heard of along the way. And I think they're all challenges that are there at some point. But I think my time is definitely right now 100% devoted to getting PaveGen into the next stage, and keep continuing the growth.
So I'd like to touch on a 4-letter word that you mentioned, I think 3 times in the last minute or so. And that's the big word time, the one that we all strive to have more of. How does such a busy guy like you find time for anything else?
Yeah, I think...
Or do you just accept the fact that it is all consuming? Do you have to make sacrifices? Are you prepared to make those sacrifices? Or have you learned to try and create a little bit more work-life balance, the thing we all strive for, the kind of the perfect outcome?
Yeah, I think that no one's perfect, and I'm far, far from that. I think that I can process a lot in a day. I think that what I can do in 1 hour is probably maybe what some people can do in a day, in that I can just deal with an intense amount of like bandwidth. I think having a really good team around me eliminates some of that time constraint. So like for everything from a great EA to someone who can run sales. So, as soon as a sale comes in and I'm working on it, I can send it to them to work on and devote the right amount of time to. And I've got a great head of operations who can manage the day to day, people who help me on the fundraising and balancing out all those sides of the business. But I think it's about finding time to switch off, which is so hard. And I think, I try and look at it as if, imagine you walk down the stairs from your office and get the tube home and walk upstairs to your home. You've got to look at every single step you make as a way to take your mind out of the million things going on in your mind. And obviously, like in business, there's so much there. And then try and plug into where you want to be at home, which is either with family or friends or partners or whatever it is. And I just try and learn and think about that every single day of how to like try and, because if you don't never switch off, it can be a problem, right? And I've lived that for many, many years. So I'm striving still to find a way to unplug. And I think if you'd met me in Silicon Valley yesterday after 6 hours of back-to-back meetings, I'd be going like a machine gun. But you've got to kind of just calm it down and focus and look at your priorities and then get to that point. So I definitely don't have an answer, but it's something I'm looking at almost on a daily basis.
I was hoping to seek an answer for myself here. The reason we don't see much of each other is because we're both so busy. But yeah, I think what I liked about the answer you've just given and shared with people is the fact that, that work-life balance is really difficult to achieve, because on the one hand, if you are striving for success and all those things you're very passionate about, there is going to be an imbalance somewhere. And I think what you're saying is that you kind of accept that as part and parcel of that journey, to use that word yet again. I know it's a bit cliche these days, but that's what it is. It's a path from here to there, and the fact you are prepared to trade one thing off against another.
Yeah, and I think my final point on that is like I live on a boat in central London. It's an eco boat. It's powered by the sun. So I've got a big solar around it. And what I love about that is that I have like a really zen place right in the centre of London, that when I look out the boat at night, I see the ducks quacking, I see the river. And for me, having somewhere that is not travelling for hours but can be quite zen is like a really good way to chill out. I don't have internet on my boat on purpose. It's like a floating house. So it's not like a canal boat. It has like a few stories. So it's a great place to live. And I found that having that sacred place that you can come back to that's not really, really far away really helps balance out, and that I can be home in 15 minutes, but I can also be super chilled and relaxed on my boat. And I feel like if I was in, and where I've lived previously, like really dense urban spaces that are really noisy, and being in Brixton, it's one of the most polluted places in London and loudest. I was opposite a police station as well. So I just find that that's really helped me to like be zen when I need to be zen.
I did not know you didn't have Wi-Fi on your boat, and the thought of not having Wi-Fi kind of freaks me out, and I'm sure it freaks lots of other people out. But that's a really interesting point. Do you think social media, the internet, accessibility helps or hinders?
Hinders, 100%. I think we're going through like a revolution at the moment in calm tech. People are getting addicted to their smartphones. If you think about Facebook, it's a group of incredibly intelligent people sitting in Silicon Valley designing things to make you be addicted to it. You get a dopamine hit every time something happens on social media, when you get a like on Instagram. And I think it's a massive problem that we're facing as a society. And so it's an incredible waste of time unless you focus and prioritize it in the right way. How easy is it to start scrolling Instagram versus going through some work emails? And I work hard to try and balance it out. And by no means am I perfect. I've still got the apps on my phone, but I think it's a huge problem. And I'm so glad that I grew up without Facebook, age 12 and 13 and 14, because it would be a different place, I think, now. So I think you got to be careful of how dangerous social media is. Yeah, a great tool for business as well.
I'm sad to say that we're kind of getting towards the end of our chat today. I'd love to go on talking for a lot longer, but one question that we ask all of our guests, which you may or may not know, is taking all of the knowledge that you've acquired over this time, being successful, taking that embryonic idea and turning it into something spectacular. Clearly you've learned a lot along the way. Now let's just fast forward to a point where you've got, say, a 12, 15-year-old version of yourself sitting on your knee saying, right, Dad, one piece of advice before I go out into the big wide world. Just one kind of simple piece of advice to set me on the path to success in life, whatever that looks like. What one bit of advice would Laurence Kemball-Cook Sr. give Laurence Kemball-Cook Jr.?
Wow. So I think it's a really big question. And I'd say that it's got to come down to, just believe in yourself, be bold and believe in your ideas. And I think that belief, which would come across as confidence, will always help you grow it, as long as you have that belief and don't ever doubt yourself. So I'd definitely say that's what I go for.
Is there anyone that's really inspired you on this amazing path to success?
Yeah, I think on my journey, I've had, I guess, a few people that have inspired me. I think, look, everyone's got the icons that you see online and on TV and so forth. And then you've got the very real people. So I've got like great mentors / great friends now, people like Will King, who started King of Shaves. So he started a razor company that got to 23 million revenue, that was in all the supermarkets, and he was taking on $1 billion people like Gillette, and not they don't let you go lightly. So I think someone like Will King's been great. He's been supporting me throughout the journey. And then also I'd say someone like Emma Sinclair. So Emma was the youngest woman ever to IPO her business. She's the founder of a company called Enterprise Alumni. And I think I saw her do a speech a few years ago in the Spanish embassy. And I went up to her and I said, look, that was mind-blowing. Can you help me? And she's really, really helped me on my journey. And I guess we help each other as we're both traveling the world on what is a very lonely way. So I think having mentors has been really important to me. There's others that I haven't mentioned, but like they're the two people that, their advice usually is home in one, when you hold in one, when you hear from them.
And you're quite an accomplished speaker as well now, traveling around, delivering messages that help other people, to the point you made earlier.
Yeah, I think that, what I found interesting is that having, I guess, experiences I've got, but has allowed opportunities to go and, go to Bahrain and speak with the government there and speak to like some wide groups and across Korea. And I think I'm doing a project with Bank of America, Merrill Lynch in a few weeks' time. And so I've had the opportunity to meet some incredible people in some incredible places through speaking. And I think it's a great way to spread the message, but also meet people you never meet. And ultimately, I can tell I'm on a crusade, which is trying to make the world powered from footsteps. And I've got to be banging the drum as loud as I can, pounding the pavements, literally, and speaking is getting out there in completely new markets. So I continue to do that, and it's a really exciting way to, I guess, get momentum and see some really cool stuff.
Well, you're certainly banging the drum on the Sandro Forte podcast, because there's lots and lots and lots of people listening to you. So thank you for sharing so much valuable information and words of wisdom with us. Clearly, the next question that everyone's going to have is, how do they find out more about you and PaveGen and all the things you're doing? Now, you mentioned that you kind of disconnect from social media, but there must be ways for us to find out more about Laurence Kemball-Cook.
Sure, yeah. I'm definitely on social media, not as much as maybe I could be, but so I think Twitter, at Laurence KC, and that's LaurenCekc, and then at PaveGen, so PAVEGEN, and I guess the stories on fairly regularly on Instagram as well, and that's at Laurence KC Graham. That's on there. So yeah, take a look. And
if they try to interact with you, just don't expect a reply during the evening, because she'll be in your Zen space on your boat.
Hopefully, I can't guarantee that, but yeah, no, definitely. In the day, there's always time for some of the interactions.
Well, thank you. Today's been, eye-opening, and so many people listening will be thanking you for sharing so openly so many amazing things, and I'm sure lots of people will be calling for you to come back and share some of those stories that you alluded to earlier, some of the spectacular failures and the great successes, and some of the funny things that I'm sure have happened along the way. So Laurence Kemball-Cook, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Fantastic. Look, thanks so much for having me, and I look forward to hearing from maybe the listeners and being an avid listener of the podcast in the future.
Continued success to you. That was the Sandro Forte podcast, and what an incredibly interesting interview with Laurence Kemball-Cook. There are many more fantastic guests joining me over the coming weeks, so please make sure you subscribe if you want to pick up some great tips on success. Remember, as always, you can follow us on social media at Sandro's Podcast. That's Sandro's with an S, same on all channels. And we'd love to hear your stories, ideas, anecdotes, challenges, or whatever motivates you. So please keep those emails coming. hello@sandrospodcast.com. And if you can, please leave a review on iTunes so we know what you'd like more of in the future. Until next week.